I gotta be honest, if I had to start over from zero today, I don't think I'd get back into PPC. It made a lot of sense for us 2, 3, 4 years ago, and it wasn't as saturated an ecosystem. I know you know that way better than I do. Y'all were like the only players in the white label game for a really long time. You're still clearly the best, but all these people have come rushing into it now, so it's really saturated. I would let your market guide you towards the service offering and or bundle that really makes sense for you to niche down on.
Welcome to Show Me the Nuggets, where each week Joe chats with world-class entrepreneurs to find out the key principles, strategies, and processes that lie behind their outstanding achievements. Now, your host, the no bullshit serial entrepreneur, Joe Troyer.
Hey everybody, it's Joe Troyer, and welcome to another episode of Show Me Your Nuggets. No, I'm sorry, Show Me the Nuggets. Today I have becoming a good friend, Kasim Aslam, on the show. Super excited to have you, Kasim. When we chat, my brain rolls, right? I get excited. I have really good conversations with you. I feel like you're a nerd at heart, just like I am when it comes to advertising and marketing, and such a student in the role, right? I feel like you're always learning, always pushing the boundaries. And so whenever we talk, man, I feel like we just jive, and super excited to bring you onto the show and share with everybody else what they've been missing, man, our conversations.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me. I'm super excited too.
So, Kasim, you run a digital marketing agency called Solutions 8. I know that you are very highly ranked with that company. You also work with Digital Marketer and are one of their traffic coaches. You've wrote a book. And before we go too deep on things, so to speak, and get into the weeds, give me a little bit of a background on, 15 years in the industry. Before we get into that, like how'd you just enter into this world? How'd you find digital marketing?
Digital marketing found me. Just kidding. I wanted to be an actor. That was kind of my sad, pathetic, embarrassing history. I've been in 80 films, all horrible. And I needed something that I could do from anywhere on my own time. And so it didn't start off with digital marketing. I started outsourcing little software builds. I've got a cousin in Pakistan who had you couldn't even call it a software house. It was like two dudes in a basement that could hack some stuff up. And it turns out that I'm not a very good actor, but I ended up being pretty good at some of that problem solving stuff. So where the acting went by the wayside, I ended up with this little business that started to grow, and software led really quickly to marketing. Because when you build something for somebody, the next question they ask is, well, how do we get this found? And initially I was like, I don't know, dude, best of luck to you. But over time, the entrepreneurial nerve kicks in and you're like, well, maybe I can solve that problem for you too. So, yeah, man, it's, my quote unquote real passion led to what ended up being the best career I ever possibly could.
Hey, real quick, before we dive into the rest of this episode, real quick, I promise my team and I would like to personally thank you, our audience, yes, you listening right now, for all the amazing support that you guys have been giving the podcast. The growth has been just crazy, and I want you to know that we're super, super appreciative to you. So we've been trying to think of something cool that we could do to give back to our audience, to give back to you guys, and I think we've come up with something that's really, really unique. It's something that's special. So here's the thing. The team here at Digital Triggers, my own little team here, has decided that we're going to give away a gift pack that includes our top-of-the-line resources to sell SEO, right? We know that so many of you guys out there are agencies. This is going to literally give you contracts, proposals, pitches, scripts that you guys can use, outreach templates. It's a pack of assets and collateral for anybody wanting to sell SEO services or marketing services to any type of business, not just local businesses. This has been used to land e-com deals, all kinds of deals out there. So if you didn't hear that, let me make it a little more clear. Okay, our Digital Triggers family is giving you some of the best of the content and the resources that we've ever put together, absolutely free, just for listening to the podcast. Okay, all that you have to do is go to digitaltriggers.io/gift pack. And you are good to go, folks. It is that simple. We'll make sure that this page is up and ready for you guys by the time this episode airs. And with that being said, let's get back to the episode. All right. That was all right. I think that went okay.
Awesome, man. So you got started doing some dev work and then ultimately ended up in marketing through osmosis, kind of, right? Like people just, hey, you did this for me. Great. Now let's get it found. I need help bringing in some revenue.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. And then, I think every marketer I've ever been on the phone with started an SEO. That seems to be like, the marketer's gauntlet. So we started an SEO, and that ends up being a little bit less than scalable. Hopefully nobody, fires any rockets at me for saying that. But it opened up the world of marketing for me for sure.
That's awesome, man. So tell us a little bit about Solutions 8 today. Like, what do you guys do? Who do you guys serve? What's your team look like? Open Pandora's box.
Yeah, we're 100% Google Ads, which also I was brought along kicking and screaming. I brought in a business partner about 5 years ago. He was my worst client. Really, really brilliant young man. Him and his family owned a company that was rocketing to the moon as far as the efficacy. They helped automotive dealerships nationwide with unsold follow-ups. And when it started to take off, one of their investors tried to steal the IP, and the whole thing came crashing down. So I watched one of the smartest, hardest working people I've ever known basically kind of start from zero. And he ended up getting a job somewhere because he's hyper employable. He was very competent, and he's making more than I could afford to pay him. And, he had more security than I could have offered him, but it was also very much a grind. And so I just worked on him. And, I think 6 months worth of conversations and me calling a check-in, he decided to come over and help me with my little agency at the time, which at the time I was trying to be an absentee owner. I wasn't trying to dig in. I was trying to get out. And I had this weird, Tim Ferriss dream of just setting up little businesses that ran and made me money. And what's funny about it is when he came into Solutions 8, we had 8 core service offerings. That's why we're called Solutions 8. It's the stupidest name in the world. I was doing video and SEO and web dev and PPC and content and social. And we had, staff for each of those. So I was basically running 8 companies. And John, my business partner, was the one that identified everybody that's successful with us was successful with Google Ads first. And it makes a lot of sense now from the outside looking in, because that's the Coliseum. That's like, let me walk into the octagon with my 3 biggest competitors and see if I can win this fight. And then if they can, now, content, video, social, all those things end up being far more accessible. So we began to not cut services off, but we just began to use Google Ads as like the litmus test. And it wasn't very long before we realized, man, we should just do this. Like, we're really good at it. And this is where, we can prove the model, because there's a ton of value to SEO or social media marketing or any of those things, but it's really hard to tie revenue back to them. And, agencies that run those businesses will be the first ones to tell you that. I like being able to say, hey, I made you 400% return on ad spend. You can't fire that guy. You know what I mean? Like, or if you do, you're kind of stupid. Or you end up coming back, which happens to us relatively often. Anybody who takes a walk, like, there's the joke inside is, oh, they'll be back. And they tend to be, because they come back 90 days later thinking like, oh, this is a lot harder than I thought it would be. So that was a bit of a tangent, Joe, forgive me, but that's how we ended up where we are. And I think we're one of the best in the world. And it's because we niche down. You'll hear a lot of these thought leaders and the consultants and whoever tell you the riches are in the niches. And as a young entrepreneur, I didn't listen to that because I thought I could be good at everything. But as soon as I niche down, it just gives you the opportunity to really dig deep and sink your teeth into something.
Dude, I love that. I think that I agree. Google Ads is so key. And I loved your analogy of going into the octagon, right? And fighting with your top competitors and seeing, like, can they make it out alive, right? And you're so right? Like, if they can make it out alive, then the rest of the marketing is like a cakewalk almost, right? Because you've made it out in the most competitive, most cutthroat part of the industry, I believe. But if you can make it there, you have volume on demand, right? And everything else, like with organic, you're going to get a great return on investment. But until you know those keywords, and if you know that you can compete, dude, I love it. That's really, really smart.
Yeah, well, and you just nailed it there too. I think PPC is I don't think it's the only thing people should be doing. I don't even think you should do it forever. If you can work yourself out of having to pay for traffic, that's awesome. Good for you. But until you know what keywords perform, don't run SEO. Until you know what narrative pushes, don't run social. Until you know what, your best hooks and your call to action and how your product is priced, like bottom of the funnel paid advertising helps define everything else that you should be doing. It's the sandbox. So it's the first thing you should do. And then if you can work yourself out of it, that's, some people can, some people can't. But I think it's the quarterback. And, if we're on a chessboard, I think it's the thing that kind of helps drive everything else.
A guy that's local here, Rich Sheffrin, says, right, whoever can spend the most on advertising wins, right? And Google Ads is gonna, in most verticals, probably be the most expensive. But if you can get into that octagon, right, and go up against your top competitors, and you can come out winning, right? Like, you've built one heck of a company that's gonna probably survive the tests of time.
Yeah, well, that's, I'm stealing this line from my buddy Scott Cunningham, who runs Socialite. He does Facebook ads, but he did a talk for us at an event that we ran, and he was talking about how people will say, "Oh yeah, I tried Facebook ads and it didn't work." And Scott goes, "Well, I'm pretty sure Facebook did its job. Like, I'm pretty sure Facebook brought you the traffic." And I feel that way about Google. It's you're not testing Google. Google's testing you. If your competitor's offering a better product at a faster speed at a lower price, and has a better ascension model and better customer service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you lose. So a lot of people that enter the Google ecosystem, they just find out the inadequacies of their business model, which for some entrepreneurs is exciting. It's exciting to jump in there and be like, okay, here's where I need to improve. And I think there's value there too. There's value in a failed campaign because it tells you where your holes are, what it is that you need to go fill.
No, 100%. I was chatting with one of our partners. He sits on the board of one of our companies, and he's like, "Tell me about this new offer you guys have been pushing that you've been having great luck with Facebook ads on, with paid acquisition on." He's like, asked me some questions. Right, great new business, just had a 50K month, and he's like, "Joe, let me ask you a question. What's your cost per sale?" And it's the $5,000 offer. I'm like, "Man, it's only $1,300." And he's like, "That's great. That's great. Fantastic. Great luck." So I'd like to give you one piece of advice. I'm like, "Okay, great." He's like, "That one piece of advice is I want you to get that cost per sale up to $4,000. And I'm like, "What?"
Wow.
He's like, "I want you to be able to spend $4,000 to acquire a customer and not think twice about it, because then if you do, nothing can stop you guys." He's like, "If not, the offer is probably going to work for 2 or 3 months and then it's going to fizzle out." Fast forward 2 or 3 months, fizzled out. Right. So we worked on getting up the average customer value, being able to actually afford to pay that on a cost per sale basis. And now it works month in, month out like clockwork, because we really can pay more than anybody else in the space to acquire that customer.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. The foresight there, I think, is, you can just tell he's a grizzled entrepreneur. He's made that mistake before.
Yeah, but it's such a backwards thought, right? Us at marketers are like, let's drop down the cost per sale. We need to be as profitable as possible. No, he's like completely counterintuitive, says the opposite. "No, Joe, I want you to be able to pay $4,000 because then you can't lose." And I'm like, wait, what? Like,
yeah. Well, you destroy the competitive ecosystem. You basically go throw a grenade in the center of every one of your competitors' marketing models, because now you're willing to give more and spend more. Yeah, I think that's super sharp.
So, man, I love what you guys have done, focused on PPC. Is there any niches within PPC that you guys focus on? You guys take all types of businesses, e-com, local. Help me understand who's the right type of prospect for Solutions 8. Well, the new Solutions 8, the Solutions 1.
Yeah, Solutions 1. That's so funny. I should go grab that domain. We've been Yeah, that's right. We've been PPC specific for a couple of years. We've made a really heavy footprint in the e-commerce space. So like we're founders of the 3X Shopify Challenge, if you've heard of it. I spoke at Traffic and Conversion on smart shopping. I think there are very few people that know what we know about smart shopping specifically. So e-com is nice too, because it gives you the opportunity to really tie, like I said earlier, clicks to revenue, as opposed to saying, hey, Mr. Attorney, I sent you 50 leads this week, and now I have to see, did you follow up? Did you qualify? Did you, I end up going to war with those clients a little bit. With e-commerce, it's just, we made you this much money and I can prove it. So love e-com. Yes. And it's, it's a more scalable model. I also like the entrepreneur that's attracted to an e-commerce business because they're systems minded. They're very intentional with the way that they do things, and they understand the machine. They understand that they're building a machine as a business, as opposed to, not that I have anything, we have a ton of service-based clients. I'd say half of our clients actually are, service in some capacity, but they don't look at their business as a machine. And so it becomes very hard for you to tweak if you're making a recommendation or an improvement opportunity or whatever, they kind of take it a little bit more personally than the e-com business owner who's just like, oh yeah, let's go sharpen this all.
I think that's really interesting. I think not all the time, but a lot of times you end up with a more educated client, right? Like being an e-com, like your cash flow model is very different than most of like the service businesses that we would serve as an agency, right? And I think like having to learn that model, know your numbers, becomes so much more important in that business. I mean, a couple bad months and you got to reorder inventory, and man, like you could go out of business.
Yep. Yeah, what you just said, man, is brilliant. Know your numbers. I am shocked. I mean, like floored, blown away. If I think about it, it'll depress me at how many entrepreneurs and tenured folks, dude, like people that have been in business for 10 years, and I end up on the phone with them, for whatever reason, and they have no idea, what's the cost per acquisition on your average client? I don't know. What's the lifetime value of a client? I don't know. What are your margins? I don't know. I'm like, how are you here? How did you survive this long? Like it's just one of those things that, man, and it's not hard. It's probably 90 minutes worth of work. Open up QuickBooks, you know what I mean? Like go figure out what those numbers are, because then you get to have the conversation that, that your buddy had with you, which is, hey, let's get that number all the way up to $4,000. Where your room to play is. So I hope that didn't come across as like judgmental or catty, but it's just one of those things now, because that's my world. It's so hard to understand how people can run a business that way. It feels so stressful to me.
No, 100%. So stressful. Definitely. So I'm sure you speak with agency owners all the time, like we do as well. You're in the same world, right? When somebody looks at you and they're like, Kasim, man, you guys have crushed it. I still have this Solutions 8 first started agency. I'm still serving everybody, doing everything. Like what advice do you give people in those shoes, in that circumstance? Because I'm sure that there's going to be lots of them listening to this podcast that would want to ask you that question.
Yeah.
How do I go about down to one or niching down?
I think it needs to be a natural evolution. I don't think you should, hear a podcast like this and be like, all right, we're cutting off all of our services and we're going here. I think the benefit that I did have is I had 8 data points. I got to see the difference between social and SEO and PPC and, web dev and whatever. And then because we had that data, I had a really smart partner who was able to look at it and go, well, this is the tip of the spear. And I'm not telling everybody to go run a PPC business. I got to be honest. If I had to start over from zero today, I don't think I'd get back into PPC. It made a lot of sense for us 2, 3, 4 years ago. And it wasn't as saturated an ecosystem. I know you know that way better than I do. Y'all were like the only players in the white label game for a really long time. You're still clearly the best, but all these people have come rushing into it now, so it's really saturated. I would let your market guide you towards the service offering and or bundle that really makes sense for you to niche down on. So don't go seek out. There's something called the corridor principle. I wish I could cite the author, because it's unfair of me not to steal his IP and to forget who it was that said this. But I was reading a book and he talked about how all the best business ideas have actually come from somebody who's already in business. So, you're working at Ford Motors and you're on the assembly line, and all of a sudden you realize, man, the way that this spring works is horrible. I'm going to go build a new spring. Well, you never would have known that if you weren't already on the assembly line. So if you're in the coffee shop thinking about your new business, stop that. Go do literally anything. Go get a job go partner with somebody, yep. Go intern, go do literally anything. And then all of a sudden you're going to see the thing that helps you niche down. So if you're not doing anything, go do something that it's just kinesthetic. It just gets you moving. And if you're already doing stuff, don't get the grass is greener syndrome. What you're doing now is probably good. You're probably just doing too much of it. So every entrepreneur wants to do more, because that's how we think. Like, how do I do more? What you need to do is go find the thing that works that you can do less on. And, I think that'll lead you to a pretty positive niche. How was that, Joe? Is that more or less good advice?
I liked it. I liked it. Actually, most people would say like start the business with the vision of where you want to go. Right. But I think it's hard, like to just, you got like a blindfold on. It's like eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Like, how do you know? So I do really like that. And it reminds me of a talk earlier this week that I had with an agency owner, and they specialize in a specific niche. In local service-based businesses, but specifically one niche, but they do all the services, right? Web design, PPC, SEO, social, like everything, the whole gambit, full service, and they're dying because of it, but they've gotten to like $60,000, $70,000 a month in revenue. And now they're looking at it, and your conversation reminds me of them, and they're like, all right, now we're going to really specialize. because we know the marketing, we know how to sell it, we know how to fulfill it, and we know what really drives a good return on investment. And so I think they're the perfect example of that.
Yeah. Well, and talking about numbers, we're at about $2.5 million gross revenue now. When I was Solutions 8 and I had 8 core service offerings, I couldn't break $500,000. Like I physically could not, beat my head against the wall. So for those on the fence about niching down, you're not giving anything up. You're leaning into scalability. That's how you scale. And the other benefit that we have, and I feel this way about pretty much anybody who has their processes defined in a specific niche, is we can scale to the moon now. My big bottleneck at the moment is just talent acquisition, which I think is most agencies because we're all in a labor business. But as fast as I can bring on client managers, I can bring on clients. And I couldn't do that previously with, the full 8 services at the old Solutions 8.
Thanks for tuning in to Show Me the Nuggets. If you've been enjoying the podcast and find our content helpful, please visit our Apple Podcast page, hit the subscribe button, and leave us a review. Joe and the whole team have been working hard to bring more value to the show. Your feedback will go a long way in helping us make the show better and reach a wider audience.